This special meeting of the Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Director Carr?
Here.
Director Garcia?
Present.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Present.
Director Jackson?
Present.
Director Leonard?
Present.
Director O'Halloran?
Here.
Director Seamson?
Present.
Director Zombor?
Present.
And President Herndon.
Present.
There are 9 members present.
Thank you. Will the secretary please read the call of the meeting?
A special meeting of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors is scheduled to take place in the auditorium of the Central Services Building, 5225 West Valete Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for consideration of the items of business listed in the public notice. This meeting will be broadcast on WYMS Radio 88.9 FM, on Time Warner Spectrum Channel 13, and via live stream and the MPS YouTube stream at https://mpsmke.com/broadcast. Items of business on tonight's agenda are item 1, action on a request to approve a resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit for recurring purposes. Item 2, action on a request to approve a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit for recurring purposes. Public testimony will be taken in person and virtually during the meeting. The deadline to register for access to the virtual platform is 3:00 p.m., Thursday, January 11th, 2024. Registration may be completed by phone or email. Written testimony may be submitted to the Milwaukee Board of School Directors by U.S. mail at 5225 West Valete Street in Milwaukee, 53208, by email to governance@milwaukee.k12.wi.us, and by fax to 414-475-8071. Comments received before 3 p.m. on Thursday, January 11th, 2024, will be forwarded to the board for its consideration.
Thank you. The chair will now ask the secretary to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair invites any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so, and asks that those who do not wish to participate please remain silent during the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We acknowledge that Milwaukee lies on traditional Menominee, Potawatomi, and Ho-Chunk homeland along the southwest shores of Lake Michigan, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes. On this site, the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnick rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's Menominee, Ojibwa, Ho-Chunk, Oneida, and Mohegan sovereign nations remain present to this day. This meeting is being conducted in person from the Central Services Building. In order to allow as much public access and participation as possible, this meeting is also being broadcast via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we will have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience. For each of our items of business, I'm sorry, could we get our interpreter, please?
Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor, llame al 312-626-6799. Nuevamente, 312-626-6799. E introduzca el número de reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
Thank you. For each of our items of business, we will hold a discussion and public hearing. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker slip and bring it to our secretary, Ms. Koala. Virtual speakers are asked to remain on the platform until you're called upon. After speaking, virtual speakers may follow the rest of the meeting using the broadcast information previously mentioned. When you're called upon to speak, please state your name and spell your last name for the record. For the sake of fairness and to give everyone a chance to speak, the chair reserves the right to limit the length of time allowed to any one speaker. Written testimony will be accepted for transmittal to the board. Send this testimony to the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53201-2181, or fax to 414-475-8071, or email it to governance@milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictate that all comments should be directed to the chair of the committee. Also, any questions or requests, including those from the public, committee members, or the administration, are to be directed toward the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. For the safety of all and to ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone who engages in such harassing or intimidating words or actions will immediately be asked to cease. If such behavior continues, a recess will be called and the offending parties will be removed from the meeting. Anyone ejected from the meeting may continue to listen to the meeting or to access the agenda items online. However, the individual will not be allowed to rejoin the meeting. Also, no one other than members of the board, designated staff, and those who have been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meeting of the board and its committees. Finally, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the Meetings, Agendas, and Minutes page of the MPS website. Now let's begin, Madam Secretary, with item 1.
Item 1 is action on a request to approve a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit for recurring purposes. The administration recommends that the board approve the resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit for recurring purposes, option 3, as included in the attachments.
Would the administration please present this item?
Yes. Good evening, President Herndon and members of the board. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. At its meeting on December 21st of 2023, the board adopted a resolution by Director Zambor and President Herndon to address the MPS funding crisis. The board adopted resolution states that the board deems it desirable to seek a referendum to be held on Tuesday, April 2nd of 2024. The resolution directed the administration to bring back a recommendation for a referendum. I have with me this evening Chris Thiel, Policy Manager, Martha Kreisman, who is the Chief Financial Officer, Todd Hieski, who is Barrett Vice President, School Business Specialist, and Allison Buchanan, a partner with Quarles and Brady, are here to present the referendum proposal with several scenarios. The administration recommends that the board approve option 3 as attached and as presented by the team. At this time, I will turn it over to Martha Kreisman, Chief Financial Officer, to walk us through. Martha.
Thank you, Dr. Posley. President Herndon, members of the board, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. The presentation today aligns to the 5 priorities for success and supports the strategic plan. Tonight, we are here to present a referendum proposal that includes the need to exceed the state-imposed revenue limit. The impacts if there is no increase to the revenue limit, and referendum funding scenarios for the board to consider. And Chris?
Thank you, President Herndon, members of the board. Chris Thiel, Legislative Policy Manager for Milwaukee Public Schools. And just a little bit of the background that we've been discussing over the past months, and frankly, for a good period of time, as you can see here in the chart presented before you, to provide a little context for how we've arrived here tonight and why we've kind of brought together a discussion on the possible tools that we could have to move forward to support our students. As this board knows, and as we have discussed for a long period of time, in fact, for 16 years, the state of Wisconsin has not provided a per-pupil adjustment that has kept pace with inflation. At one time, when revenue limits were originally put in place in the early 1990s, the state also had a law that mandated the state at least provide that commitment of a per-pupil adjustment that kept pace with inflation. We haven't done that for 16 years. And as we've discussed in 2023, the graduating class this spring was the first class of students that never saw per pupil funding provided to them actually keep pace with inflation. So over the years, the gap that you see here in the slide has occurred. That simply put, had we kept pace with inflation over that period of time, students in Milwaukee Public Schools and students across the state would have $3,380 more per pupil than are available to them today. These numbers come from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau. They track what had been previous state law with that inflationary adjustment. And as you can see here, the Wisconsin Association of School Business Officials has assisted with this slide. And I think across the state in many districts, those boards are having the same conversation as we're all challenged with the underfunding that we're seeing here today. As you know, we've made many efforts. We've combined with our partners over this last state budget period to try to make sure the resources were put in place to support students. We've marched to Madison to call for funding for students with disabilities and have been engaged in every step of the way, making clear that this is the real scenario that we are faced with as we look toward the spring and as we look toward the next school year to put together a budget that is sufficient for MPS children. The other piece when we talk about this funding scenario is if you look on that blue line and there's a period there where it's flat for 2 years in a row, when we put together our forecasting in the past, we knew that this, we hadn't seen funding that was keeping pace with inflation. But that flat bar there in the middle of that blue line toward the tail end, those were 2 years in a row during the pandemic when there was no per pupil adjustment at all provided. We saw 2 years of zero in a row. And so that was surprising to us, obviously unfortunate when we talk about appropriately funding students. But that is those 2 years of zero in a row exacerbated the gap that was already growing. So when we then look specifically at Milwaukee Public Schools, and we know that we've got this underfunding of $3,380 per pupil, what does that mean when we look at it at the district level? And when we do that calculation, I think you'll see on the next slide that what that means is had we simply had that inflationary adjustment, had we simply kept pace with inflation, students would have over $210 million today and annually to help support their education. So in effect, when you're not keeping pace with inflation, you're underfunding students, and we're seeing a $210 million level of underfunding from the state when they deviated from what had been state law. In addition, when we talk about that special education funding in particular, which many districts have joined us in talking about, the governor proposed a reimbursement rate of 60% for students in public schools. Right now, it's hovering around 32%. And the state legislature in the past, through the Blue Ribbon Commission, has actually made a recommendation to itself that it should meet this mark of a 60% reimbursement rate. So that's not an extraordinary amount, and in fact, the state has recommended to itself that it do this. It has not. And as we advocated over the year, as we came to the end of the state budget process, we knew that the state still had a surplus. And there had been some hope over the last 4 or 5 months that perhaps that surplus would be used, some action would be taken to direct those funds to schools. That has not happened. And in fact, at the end of December, when we found out that the state has a $6.7 billion surplus right now, the state superintendent, and we appreciate her leadership on this, issued a statement saying that some of those funds should be used to support students with disabilities as a minimum. But as you know, as we have discussed, and as we laid out the scenarios for what our district in particular was facing because of this underfunding, we do not see the state moving forward to support students. And so many districts, including ours, are now in this position where we have to make a decision at the local level to figure out how to step in, if possible, to support students. So that's the background of where we are with state funding. And I believe Martha can tell you where we are specifically with our finances.
So instead of having, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer, President Herndon, members of the board. Instead of having $210 million in additional funds, MPS has at least a $200 million shortfall in our budget going into the 2024-25 school year. And the drivers of these financial challenges are the state-imposed revenue limit, inflation that is rising further than our revenue, only about 31% special education reimbursement to the district, meaning the district pays for the majority of special education services without any additional funding. The need to have salaries that are competitive to maintain and attract staff, and cost to maintain facilities that are more than an average of 80 years old. Daily transportation for about 40,000 students. Last year in January, we brought, together with the Office of Accountability and Efficiency, a funding forecast that's presented on this slide. And the projection at the time was in fiscal year 2024-25, the revenues minus expenditures would land us in a deficit of about $182 million when accumulated with this year's deficit. And while we don't expect a per se deficit this year, we really try to maintain ESSER funding as supplemental to the district regular budget. But this year, we unfortunately did have to take some operational costs and put them into ESSER. So in turn, it is like having a deficit because those costs will have to be moved back into the regular budget for next year. And we don't have the funding to do that. So the district has been very fiscally responsible with our dollars. We have put our focus on the students and the staff, and that is shown by putting 94% of our school operation funds at the schools. And that was demonstrated especially in 2019 when we diverted much funding from central services to the schools. We were probably at about 88% that year going to the schools, and we have grown it to 94% of the school operation fund. We have minimized borrowing. In fact, we have just recently paid off our neighborhood school initiative debt, and without asking for more borrowing. We also share services with community organizations to maximize our tax dollars. And then we've proven our fiscal responsibility through our high bond ratings. As far as 2024-25 revenues, most of our funding comes from the revenue limit, which is made up of state aid and property tax levy. When running the revenue limit numbers for next year, there's an estimate of up to $5 million decrease in our revenue limit next year. And we have stabilized our enrollment, which is a good thing. But the problem with our revenue limit isn't necessarily our enrollment, it's the lack of state increases, regular state increases. If we would have had those increases, even with the enrollments that we have, we would not be in this place today. As we said before, we'd have $210 million extra dollars. As far as referendums across Wisconsin, 82% of Wisconsin districts, school districts, have gone to referendum since 1994, when there was a revenue limit imposed on school districts. And in 2022, even with school districts having ESSER funding, it was the highest year for referendum in Wisconsin, and 80% of those passed. 166 school districts asked for a referendum. On top of that, in 2023, the revenues raised from the referendum in Wisconsin school districts was more than the allocation from the state for 421 school districts for special education. So the referendum local dollars for school districts was $650 million, and the funding for special education across the state was $517 million. This comes from the forward analytics research that has been completed on referendum in Wisconsin. Referendum seems to have become the new funding formula for Wisconsin school districts. The challenge is, if we do not have a referendum, we'll have to reduce funding to schools. We may have to eliminate or reduce district-wide specialty programs, reduce mental health supports to students, delay replacement cycles for repairs, educational materials, or technology, eliminate positions or have layoffs, freeze salaries, meaning staff would not have a cost of living increase, and now they're not keeping up with inflation either. Increase employee costs for benefits, which would mean if we freeze salaries, people's salaries would actually go down. Consolidate schools, close schools, reduce transportation, and the other option is to increase funding to MPS, and the option for that is through a referendum. Now we will go through 3 scenarios for a referendum, and Todd Hayuski from Baird is here to help us with that.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, Todd Hayuski with Baird. Thank you, President Herndon, and members of the board. So I worked with the district on the budget forecasting. So we put together revenue and expenditure assumptions and ended up matching similar deficit outlooks that was shown back in earlier last year. And we also used assumptions based on the current data we have on hand to make the most accurate tax implications for a potential referendum. So the 3 scenarios that you're looking at, they are all based on a 4-year phased-in recurring referendum. And this was the same structure that was used back in 2020 for the recurring referendum. And the reason for the district it makes sense for the 4 years is the district is positively aided, about 38%. So when you're spending an additional dollar, the state is paying about 38 cents on that dollar. So when you get that additional revenue and expenditures that first year, you get additional equalization aid the following year, and allows you to phase in those additional dollars and not necessarily see an estimated tax increase. So rather than doing it all 1 year and seeing a larger tax increase and then falling, it made sense to do it over the 4 years. And so you can see that in that first one, you can see with that includes a $150 million first year, and then phased in the next 3 years for a total of $262 million. And you can see what the surplus deficit would be estimated in in that scenario. And then what the total levy and mill rate estimated to be, and what that change would be. And the mill rate is calculated, it's a formula, it's the total levy for the school district divided by the equalized valuation, not including TIFs, and then multiplied by 1,000, and that becomes the mill rate that's talked about in school districts. To find the impact on a $100,000 home, you would multiply by 100 because the tax rate is per 1,000 of valuation. And that estimated is the net tax increase from 23-24. So there's other factors in the normal course that would either increase or decrease the levy, but that is the net increase if estimated if that referendum would go through. So you can see there is a $2.41 mill rate, or $240 on $100,000 of home, estimated increase for next year, and then relatively flat or decreasing slightly going forward. And then the next year, they're all very similar. You'll notice years 2, 3, and 4 are the same amounts, but the first year, in this scenario 2, is $140 million for a total of the $252 million over 4 years, and with a mill rate increase estimated to be $216 next year, or $216 for every $100,000 of valuation. And then the last one, $132 million first year, $244 million total over the 4 years, with an estimated tax increase next year of $1.97, or $197 on a $100,000 home. And working with the district, went over multiple scenarios, multiple scenarios we looked at, and these are the ones that seem to make the most sense for the needs of the district.
Thank you, Todd. Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer, President Herndon, members of the board. I just want to give you a short synopsis of the tax implication again from those 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 would bring in additional $150 million for the first year of the referendum to the school district, and it would be an estimated increase of $241 on a $100,000 home. Scenario 2 would be $140 million increase to the revenue limit in the first year, and $216 estimated for a $100,000 home. And then scenario 3 is $132 million the first year to exceed the revenue limit, and an estimated tax increase of $197. And we have looked at multiple ways to make sure that we conservatively impacted taxpayers by looking at several inputs to the tax levy. And to show how the district has been conservative about our levy rate, these are the mill rates, or another word for it is levy rate, since 2011-12. Back in 2011-12, the levy rate was $11.51. And if you wanted to look at that for a $100,000 home, you would take that times 100. Then in the next year, it went up to $12.22. In 2018-19, it went down to $9.58 and remained that for the next year. In 2020-21, it went up to $10.55. That was the first year of our other referendum. And then it went down from there each year. So even though we have a referendum right now, It went down each of those years till it's $7.94. And that tax levy rate, as you can see, is unusual for the unusually low for the school district, even though we're in the middle of a referendum. Actually, it's the last year of our phase-in. And our problem with funding is not unusual for school districts in Wisconsin. It's not about anything the school district is doing wrong. It's about the funding formula in Wisconsin. Our survey, we did a survey to see how respondents would feel about a referendum question on the ballot in April. And we had over 4,700 respondents, and 70% responded to put a referendum question on the ballot for voters in April of 2024. And we are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, administration members and the representative from Robert Beard. What can I say? We've been screaming this for quite some time. And one thing I'd like to point out with the administration, if you'd speak up on that briefly, is I didn't hear you mention the fact that we did not receive the appropriate funding during the COVID years either. Basically, the state said something to the effect of you had received the previous referendum, which was specifically earmarked for expansion of the arts programming in the district, as well as hiring staff, psychologists and social workers, if you will. Would you please speak up on that?
Absolutely. Excuse me, absolutely. President Herndon, Chris Steele, Legislative Policy Manager for Milwaukee Public Schools.
Your mic is on.
I apologize. Can you hear me?
Not too well.
Can you hear me?
Move your mic up a little bit.
Hello. My apologies. Chris Steele, Legislative Policy Manager for Milwaukee Public Schools. President Herndon, thank you for that question. Yes, during that period of time, when I was describing in that line chart that flat part of the bar, those 2 years of zero, to your point, that's exactly the moment where we were in the middle of a pandemic. The federal government was providing resources specific to supporting school districts with the extraordinary needs during that time. And we were one, frankly, there may have been only one other, but perhaps one of one states that said, we will not provide you the regular per pupil adjustment because you are getting those federal dollars. So it was, at that time, as you recall, we were having the conversations about the fact that we need to continue to educate our students. The state needs to continue to provide the regular support that it should provide. And we needed those ESSER dollars, which could, and by ESSER dollars, I'm saying the federal COVID money, which could only be used in very specific ways, and which was also one-time funding that we could only use in specific ways as guided by the federal government. So yes, to your point, nobody predicted that, nobody predicted the pandemic, and certainly nobody could have predicted that the state would have told us, use those federal dollars that are supposed to go for pandemic support to instead do the regular business of educating students. But that's exactly what happened, and unfortunately placed us and other districts in the financial constraints we're in now.
Thank you very much. I felt that that was very important to get the audience to understand and know that this just not start this time around. At the same time, we as a board would be negligent if we didn't try to share the full picture with our community, and also let you know that we didn't just waste the ESSER funding. It was specifically earmarked, and by the same token, we did the same thing with the prior referendum funding. We appreciate our taxpayers very much for doing so, and our children are doubly appreciative of that because we have been able to provide them with so many services from the earlier referendum that they had lacked for far too many years. And with that, I'm going to ask if board members wish to make comments or ask questions, and we can simply start on this side and work around. Director Leonard.
Okay, so no real questions for me. We've been wrestling with this really from the past summer. We were concerned about this. I know that Dr. Polsley and I and a few others were at a major event, and this was the topic of our conversations. We knew this was going to be coming. I can't imagine any public school district surviving this type of cut. I'm sorry. I see this as very existential. There are ways we can maneuver around it as much as we speak to it, but my concern is that not only are we going to affect our students directly, but from past experiences before the last referendum, classroom teachers quickly discovered that the best method for making budgets work was to increase class sizes. So for some of us in middle school, it was not unusual to carry on an average caseload of 36 to 40 students. So when we talk about the needs of our students and why we're not reaching them as much as we'd like, that many students in a classroom to make budgets meet is not the solution. Taking another $210 or $200 million out of our budget, which I believe is about an 18% cut to our operation budget, I'm guessing a little bit on my numbers here, I can't imagine what we would do. Our Montessori schools, our specialty programs, all the different things that we have going on in our district to try to work with our students that have shown such great need, especially during the pandemic, would literally just dry up in less than a year. So my concern is extremely twofold on this. I don't have any questions, but if I have something, you can come back to me.
Thank you. Director Garcia.
I have no questions, but I did want to make a statement in regards to the dire condition that we're seeing across the whole state. You know, I have the pleasure of representing this school board at the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. So I'm involved in a lot of conversations with the 421 school districts that, you know, we have mentioned, of which 82% have gone to referendum since 1994. And, you know, across the state, we're having a very urgent call to our community, simply because, you know, legislation has chosen, and I underscore that, has made the conscious choice to not invest into the students and, you know, the classrooms and the teachers and, you know, the mechanisms that make public institutions thrive. So, I mean, I think that, you know, once again, us coming to the community as a solution, it's not something that we all wake up and say like, yep, that's what we're gonna do, you know, that's what we wanna do, that's our strategy number one. However, because of the lack of responsibility of the folks that should be making better decisions, this is where we are. And I just want to say that, you know, this really reflects a conversation that's happening across the state. We are not unique to this position. And, you know, next week we have our conference where a lot of the conversation, you know, in breakout rooms and conversations that we're going to be having at this conference is really about, you know, whose responsibility, where is this onus now falling into? And here we are. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Director Carr.
Pass, can you come back to me?
Director Jackson.
No question as of now. Just still listening. I'm engaging in so much information, plenty conversations. In learning this position, I will say for myself, there's a lot that I'm learning, being newly elected. And I think that I really jumped into a whirlwind like no other as it relates to education as it stands right now in Milwaukee Public Schools. So for me, from my standpoint, there's a lot of information that I don't know, a lot of questions that I haven't, a lot of questions that hasn't been answered for me to know, to make a equitable decision to move in either direction about where we are right now financially. Coming from the business world, For me, checks and balances need to be set in place. I don't know what that looks like on this end right here. So for me, just looking at it, I think this is a Band-Aid throwing on a wound. That's where we've been bleeding for so long. So my decision is a tough one as always, but just being here right now, I'm just taking in what's been said because I need to know and want to know, and I want to make the best decision. But also there's a lot of that hasn't been enough transparency, in my opinion, on a lot of different issues, especially when it comes to finance. And that is my statement.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi.
Thank you. I have the privilege of living in between the pumping station, which is operated by Milwaukee Rec, and Genslen. And I get to go to Genslen to do weaving. I've done it now for a couple years. And you know, we talk about public schools as this thing where kids go and they learn, but it's really not, right? The business community needs to understand that public schools are an economic engine of this state. It's your talent development pipeline. It's your diversity and equity pipeline. It's your sustainable pipeline for keeping kids in this city. And so, you know, from two angles, one, we're really talking about what is the bedrock of our democracy, which is public schools. And so systemically dismantling this means systemically dismantling a city and the main economic operator of that city. And so we can't let our public school system fail. We can't fail our children. No one is saying it's perfect, but this is worth fighting for. And the numbers are plain and simple, and so for anyone to say that transparency has not been key in really understanding the impacts and effects of what a $200 million shortfall would look like for our employees, our students, and our families is irresponsible. And so I actually would urge, I know the board has put a recommendation for number 3, but the difference between number 3 and number 2 is really only $20 per thousand. So I would even encourage our board to look at scenario 2 as a potential for moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I would love to hear, I have a question. You know, some people are looking at the news that came out around redistricting. Like, this is our lifeline. You know, there will be new maps, and maybe we'll get people who aren't quite so entrenched in underfunding their own kids, to be clear. Like, we're not the only ones talking about a referendum here. And in fact, I think they may be even considering a referendum even within Representative Voss's own district currently. So they've been underfunding students around the state, but, you know, can Mr. Thiel or administration maybe shed some light on what that timeline looks like? Because even if we got new maps, you know, would that happen? Would we revisit the budget before next year? Because that's really the urgent discussion we're having.
President Herndon, Director O'Halloran, to your question about the map specifically, we're still, obviously, there was a state Supreme Court decision. We anticipate that there may be some, or the districts will be redrawn. And there was a time when kind of we had less politics over the fact that we need to fund our kids. The proposal to have an inflationary adjustment came from Governor Tommy Thompson. So Governor Thompson is the one who put in place a system where we at least provided a per pupil adjustment that kept pace with inflation. This is not a radical idea by any stretch of the imagination. And there are many representatives who are Democrats, many representatives who are Republicans who serve in the state legislature who were once members of school boards in their communities. And we know, Ms. Kreitzman mentioned the research from Forward Analytics. Wisconsin Policy Forum has done research on this. When we say that referenda are passing in districts throughout the state, it doesn't matter the partisan makeup of any part of the state. People are supporting their schools. And so hopefully, if in fact maps are redrawn, we can move forward with the surplus that we do have as a state and have a healthy conversation about getting back to really appropriately funding our schools. And that would be a very good thing. But to your point, we are at a moment in time here where if local school districts don't step in to support their students, then local school boards will be doing their spring budgets with the level of funding cut that Ms. Kreitzman spoke to you about. So yes, in terms of your question about timing, Some of these things may come to pass, but they will not happen quickly enough to intervene and save a situation of the cuts that have been described tonight. So this is why the last time we went to referendum, it was to make sure our students were supported at the same level as as students in other districts, right? And to make sure they had the access to the same resources and programs as students in other districts. And we're coming with this proposal this evening because we want to maintain and continue to implement those programs for our kids instead of being in a position where we're talking about having to make cuts. So hopefully that answer works, but the main point here is the timeline before you is one where we have to act if we want to prevent some of these cuts.
Any follow-up?
I was just kind of curious, are they considering a referendum in Burlington right now?
President Herndon, Director O'Halloran, yes,
Okay.
yes, the Department of Public Instruction keeps a record of school districts that are going to referendum. There are some school districts that are going as soon as February. I believe Burlington and others are on that list. And then you will see by the end of the month, after the 23rd of January, there should be a filing. And as has been described here, if in fact the board decides to move forward with the referendum, we will be joined, I believe, by other districts across the state at that time. And we also know that many are considering going in November. So as was mentioned earlier by Director Garcia at the WASB convention next week, I believe this going to referendum will be a topic that a lot of people are discussing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Simpson.
Thank you, President Herndon. Yeah, I just, I remember when we did the walk so many years ago, and there's a lot of really good energy around that. And I remember a parent had gone in to speak with the legislature, with some members of the legislature, and coming out just shocked because that was her first real experience dealing with presenting herself and the situation in her school district and her concern for the future education of the people in her community, and just kind of appalled at the lack of response she was given by the people who represent her. So sadly, that's, as you pointed out, Director Garcia, that's going on across our state. And, it's heartbreaking that these stories aren't being heard by the people that, have been elected to serve us. So that puts us all in a really difficult position of turning to referendums. And I just want to be really clear that, this money is really to fill a gap that's been there and growing. It is not, increasing what we where we should be. It's just really filling a gap. And the results of the last referendum are so powerful. All of us who walk into schools see it all the time with the children who are participating in gym and music and art, and there's so much opportunity to expand those programs and grow them, and it comes before the SASE committee all the time, the need for us to continue working on those programs and many others that our children deserve. So, when we think of value in our students and value in the education they receive and that they deserve, and the children in our community, for me, this is just something that we really need to do as a board. So I just wanted to make sure that my support was heard, and I kind of agree with Director Gokul Gandhi that maybe we should ask for a little bit more. But anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Director Zomber.
Thank you, Chair Herndon. First, it's just a really kind of sad and scary thought that there are school districts all across the state having the same conversations that we're having tonight. And I guess to any of my colleagues that might be on the fence, because I heard a little bit of hesitancy, the last referendum, when our family first started an MPS, we attended a school that didn't have an art teacher and it didn't have a music teacher. And, art came on a cart. And now that school has an art and music teacher. And so, we have a responsibility to protect that and continue to expand that work. And I think if you ask any parent in MPS if they want that, they would say yes. We are the only 9 people in the city of Milwaukee with the power tonight to put this on the ballot and give the voters a choice. It's not our choice, it's the voters' choice, but we have a responsibility to give them that choice. And so I appreciate all the work that went into this. I know it's not easy. I appreciate everyone being here tonight. I'm really curious I'm looking forward to hearing what people have to say. The question I have would be around the different options, and if administration could talk a little bit about why it's recommending the option that it's recommending.
Go ahead, please.
President Herndon and members of the board, one of the things that we have to look at, we looked at all of the different scenarios that are out there. Our children have great needs. Our community have great needs, and we wanted to meet those needs. And we also understand the impact that it has on members of the community, homeowners. And we wanted to be able to meet students' needs as well as work with homeowners to make sure that we were not, we were under $200 per 100,000. So and that's kind of where we are. So, and that's how we landed with the lowest option that we had that will meet some of our student needs, but also understanding the needs of our community.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Herndon. Just to follow up to that, with option 3, that's still not as much as we're projecting. What do you see? What would we still have to do? Like, will we still have to make cuts with option 3? I think that's a concern that, I and others would have. Can you just talk a little bit about what that would look like?
Administration?
President Herndon, members of the board, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. With option 3, it would bring in additional $132 million in the first year. We're looking at a $200 million deficit. So in the first year, yes, we'd still have to reduce in order to balance the budget. The model, I put the model up on the screen. You also can see that at the top line, if there's a surplus or deficit in each of the years. So we would be able to try to save some money during some years to help any year that we'd have a deficit. But the first year, it would not fill our total funding gap. I also want to mention that with the mill rate that you see there of $9.91, you saw that historical graph of the mill rates. It's not a unusual mill rate. We're not asking for something that hasn't been experienced before.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi?
And then just to clarify, going back to 28, 29, we would be back in the same position given scenario 3, correct?
Administration.
President Herndon, members of the board, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. By the 5th year?
Yeah.
Yes, we would be in a deficit. We will have throughout those years be able to fill up somewhat of a fund balance to help with that. But as far as this model is concerned, if we follow this model, and the tax implication for saving up a fund balance is also included in this model, making it a very conservative model, because the more we spend in a year, the less the tax implications. So this model is actually kind of maximizing the tax implication. Would you agree with that statement, Todd?
Tadayevsky Baird, President Herndon, members of the board, Ms. Kreitzman. Yes, that is true. And I think just to go back to the original question, looks like there is, that a minor deficit in that, in year 5 then. And as Ms. Kreitzman mentioned, is this model shows the, a surplus in some of those years for those first early years going back into fund balance. If those dollars would be spent, that would increase the shared cost, increase the equalization aid the district would get, and then potentially even reduce that, the mill rate and tax piece as well.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Yep, and then just to clarify that scenarios 2 and 1 and that 5th year allow for not a deficit, but continued funding at a level that would appropriately fund the system.
President Herndon, members of the board, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. So this is scenario 1 with the $150 million in the first year, $262 million total across the 4-year phase-in. And you'll see a little dip in 25-26 where we would have a deficit. But yes, it continues to have enough funding for each of the years. And then for this model, $140 million in the first year. There is a dip again in that second year, but then there's enough funding for each of the school years. And this one is $216 for a $100,000 home.
Great.
And
just,
one more thing, the mill rate. It's $10.10. And you'll notice on that history I showed, it's still lower than our first year of the last referendum.
Yeah, last comment, it's so unfortunate that we have to have this conversation when the state is sitting on an almost $7-8 billion surplus. And it's not a fun conversation to be had, we should all collectively be upset that, MPS continually gets left out of discussions at the county and city level when they're finding some reprieve that we were not included in those, and we in fact were punished and then asked to pay for something we did not ask for. So that's not lost on us. And as Director Zombor said, we've got to give our children what they deserve and what they need and sustain that. So thank you for these projections.
Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to pass the gavel to the Vice President.
President Herndon.
My question for administration, I know part of the answers, but my objective here tonight is to get as much information out to the public clearly where you understand it as best we can. So along those lines, I'd like administration to answer how the district has been negatively impacted for far too many years with unfunded mandates, and we got a new one that went into effect January 1st. Would you expand upon those, please, administration?
Administration.
And what I mean by that is the state orders us to do things, but they don't provide the money to make it clear.
President Herndon, members of the board, Chris Thiel. You are absolutely correct. The state has a significant amount of unfunded mandates that it brings forward. I do not have the list in front of me, but it is long. And that,
I know it's long. It's very long.
And that is also part of the discussion probably that will be taking place at the WASB convention next week. We, this last month alone, have had proposals come before state legislative committees that would mandate, sometimes these policies are things that would be useful to do perhaps, but are significantly expensive. Sometimes they perhaps are not as useful and take away local control, obviously, over what school districts know their students need. But there are a whole host of things that we are obligated to do as school districts in the state of Wisconsin that the state continues to not provide the basic funding for. And whether it's Milwaukee Public Schools or our counterparts Association of School Boards, School Administrators Alliance, our rural school partners or suburban partners, We are all in agreement that if the state is going to propose policies that will be implemented by local school districts, that the state, especially as it has $6.7 billion, should fund those policies as well. So there are a significant, I do not have it before me, and I apologize, President Herndon, but yes, to your point, there are many, many things that go unfunded that we are expected to do per state policy.
Any follow-up?
Yeah, yes. One of them is transportation, and correct me if I'm wrong, transportation that we provide for charter and perhaps voucher schools, that is one. More recently is the SRO deal, where we've got this deficit right now, and we're asking you about the referendum, but at the same time, they slammed us with the most recent one. Some others, oh geez, there's a whole ton. Special ed, for example. Administration mentioned special education. In terms of special education, we are obligated to take and serve all children. That being the case, you would expect that we would get appropriate funding for that. Number one, for all of our students that need those services, regardless of what school they attend. And our state is reneging on that responsibility for our children that need those services the most. And one of the ways that they impact it most greatly is by not reimbursing Milwaukee Public Schools specifically. Now, what they're doing is statewide, of course, but we're the largest school district in the state, and we have the largest number of children with special needs. But they require us to do this with what was spoken earlier tonight, which was approximately 33% reimbursement. However, at the same time that we will only get reimbursed at such a low rate, 33 cents out of a dollar, if you will, the vouchers and charter schools get about 95% reimbursement. So, are in that range. It's over 90%, right?
Administration.
President Hernan Cristillo, Legislative Policy Manager for Milwaukee Public Schools. Yes, there's a program called the Special Needs Scholarship Program where students in private schools who apply to that program receive 100% funding, actually, up to about $18,000. And then if there are costs, supports needed beyond that amount, they get a 90% reimbursement rate. So when we speak about this program, we put it in the most conservative terms and talk about a 90% reimbursement rate. There are over 2,100 students, I believe, in that program. We actually have about $11 million of aid deducted from Milwaukee Public Schools to help support that program. You fill in that hole of aid deduction by increasing the levy by that amount. So yes, that's happening there. And just to your point, as you speak about unfunded mandates and we talk about state policy in general, as you know and as we've discussed, the Blue Ribbon Commission report didn't just recommend per pupil funding that kept pace with inflation. It recommended at least a 60% reimbursement rate for public school students, and as you've mentioned, that would still be far below what's provided to students in private schools. It also recommended significant reimbursement and support for English learning students. We are currently last place in the United States of America in supporting our English learning students. And we also are not a state that has a coherent policy to support students in poverty. So really, when you look at the policy recommendations that they have made to themselves through the Blue Ribbon Commission report, and frankly, what the state constitution calls for in terms of offering students an opportunity for a sound basic education, it specifies support for students with disabilities, students challenged by poverty, and English learning students. And whether, the mission that we have all as public school districts is education. And we know that in 2011, the state dramatically raised the bar for what it means to qualify as proficient in the state of Wisconsin, and in that same year dropped education funding by 5.5%. So when the state raises the bar, it should obviously raise support for students to achieve those goals that we all believe we should have for our students. We've gone in the opposite direction as a state. And yet the school districts are held accountable for helping our students meet that bar. As you know, and as you have done yourself, President Herndon, we have advocated those funds to just kind of make sure that we're doing right by our students, that we don't have that policy divergence where we say, hey, students, you need to get up here, but we're going to take funding away from you. And that's been the story of Wisconsin over the last 15, 20 years. We used to be 11th in the nation in per pupil funding. We've dropped to 24th, 25th. And that was before that moment in time where you see that flat funding 2 years in a row of 0 and 0. So we are now, we would expect when the next reports come out, drop below that 25th place mark where we used to be a national leader. So that's the history of Wisconsin in this century, frankly. And that is why school districts, again, are put in a position of trying to make sure that we're supporting our students.
Thank you so much for that.
President Herndon, do you want me to hand the gavel back to you?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Madam Secretary, do we have members of the public that wish to make comments?
We have people registered to speak here in person, and we do have some individuals on the virtual platform as well.
Okay, can we start with those, please, the ones on the platform?
Certainly. When I call your name, please state your name, spell your last name, and then give your comments. Jeanette Arellano.
Hi, my name is Jeanette Arellano, Arellano.
Thank you.
Good evening. I stand before you not just as an art teacher, but as a taxpayer and a compassionate advocate for the dreams and aspirations of students in MPS. In my classroom, I witnessed the power of art education go beyond language barriers and creating a sense of belonging. Many of our students are newcomers to Milwaukee, or even the country. So stepping into a classroom for the very first time takes courage to navigate a new educational landscape. Without even knowing that many of our students have been teaching, have often asked the question of, will you be here next year? Because they have often seen a school with no gym, no music, or no art. My kids see the art room as a place to create when things in their lives are hard to talk about. A simple pop-up art project that one of my students created gave him the courage to create 2 art projects to give to each parent as a Christmas gift because his parents recently separated, and he wanted to make sure that he knew and they knew that he loved both of them. To a student who made a 3D project to pay homage to his father, who passed away due to gun violence, and he wanted to make a project of things he wished his dad would have enjoyed, like hot dogs and spaghetti. Our students deserve the reassurance that their education and mental health is a priority. As an art educator, I not only teach art, but I create a space of stability in the face of uncertainty and hardship. Our responsibility is to nurture the hopes of those who are just beginning the journey of our schools and our city. Our commitment is to have well-funded public schools, which is not just an investment in infrastructure, but an investment where students can learn, grow, and dream without fear. I will vote yes on the referendum to support our district and its students, and I implore the board to vote yes on the referendum that transcends numbers and reflects the empathy and commitment that we owe to every child who steps into our classroom, whether it's the first time in the class or in the U.S. Let us build a future where we ask, and when we are asked, will you be here next year? We can confidently say yes, because we believe in your potential and the promise of a quality education. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Deborah Keither. Please state your name, spell your last name, and give your comments.
Hello, my name is Deborah Keither, Kuether. You can hear me, right?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. I am calling in to alert the public to the fact that the administration and the board has been irresponsible in the funding that they have had issued to them over the years. It is one thing to paint a picture of woe is me, we don't have the funding, but you do have the funding and you have misspent the funding. You have had a $35 million that you have hidden from taxpayers that caused the loss of state aid. Why should the taxpayers have to assume that irresponsible error in budgeting by this administration and board over and over again? You are hitting the taxpayers and the very people that your duty to serve. You are hitting them with another bill because you have made irresponsible mismanagement budgeting decisions for this city. And I am an advocate for public education, but I am not an advocate for individuals who do not know the basic principles of public education and budgeting. And so therefore, I will not support another referendum. You had an $87 million referendum that just went into effect. What have you done that has been in alignment with that last referendum? If you look to what you told the taxpayers that they were going to get for that $87 million, you have not fulfilled that promise. And now you are coming at the last minute with a shortfall of $200 million, and you have the audacity to blame it on the state when it is your own miscalculations that have caused you to have this shortfall. Shame on you, and shame on this board for coming to the taxpayers once again and asking for a bailout when you have failed time and time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Beverly Williams. Please state your name, spell your last name, and give your comment.
Beverly Williams, WILLIAMS, Community Takeover Voices of Milwaukee's Children. As taxpayers, we will not continue to bail out our public school district that has absolutely no accountability to taxpayers. Taxpayers elect school board members as watchdogs over MPS administration, appropriately dispersing money to take care of the needs of students, staff, and parents. We do not support any financial referendum with the same administration overseeing funds. Accountability has not occurred when it is reported that $1.3 million was given to Republican Vice Chair Gerard Randall over 10 years without valid data. $500,000 in transportation stipends missing that was meant for parents to transport their children to school during COVID. $110 million missing from the 2021 budget. And MPS teaching assistants and paras defrauded out of their hard-earned money through payroll deductions with a fraudulent teacher preparation program. Our elected board needs to do better and remove those who have placed a blemish on the district. And until that happens, we will not support any referendum as the board continues to ignore, not respond, and act oblivious to our concerns. Until that time, the elected MPS board is derelict with their duties. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, that was the last virtual speaker.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say everybody has their opinion, but one thing for sure, our records, our audits are available online to the public. They always are. When we go through these processes and procedures, a big portion of it is budgeting, and anyone can go online on the portal and review every penny of it. With that, I'm going to call the next speaker to the podium, Rick Steenwick. Would you come forward, please?
Good evening. I'm Rich Steenwick, Steenwyk. I stand before you, President Herndon, members of the board. I stand before you this evening testifying, wearing a number of different hats as a resident, a taxpayer, and the vice president of the German Immersion Foundation, which is connected to some of your specialty schools and other things that we all talk about this money being important to support. I would first like to offer some congratulations, I guess, or recognition to the administration for, keeping the scenarios and options that they presented and the one that they recommended, specifically option 3, keeping the taxpayer in mind and the projected impact of the taxes on any individual homeowner. Commend them for taking that into account. And as it follows directly from testimony I gave to this board back on December 21st. So that's good news. However, I was a little maybe disappointed or wanting to see more in the administration's presentation about maybe what some of the recovery scenarios need to look like. And I know Director Zombor maybe was starting to think along those lines and talk about that or ask those questions. It sounds like the impacts come due almost immediately. And so the concern that the referendum might fail, and we just heard from a few speakers that there's clearly a number of negative attitudes out there. MPS's own survey only indicated 70% of 4,700 people were in favor of putting it to a vote, but I think that clearly shows there's a good chance that it may not pass. And so maybe my ask to you then is, if we can clarify what some of those recovery scenarios look like, or which ones of those bad choices we might have to start going down, that would help, myself at a personal level, and even as an advocate for one of those specialty schools, to be able to drive our local advocacy in the right direction for, to really motivate people to make obviously their own correct choices in this matter as a voter, but do it with as much information as they need to do that. So thank you for your time, and I don't envy your decisions.
Okay, the next speaker is Amy Mizialko.
Amy Mizialko, M-I-Z-I-A-L-K-O, President Herndon, Superintendent Posley, and School Board Directors. I'm a special education teacher with Milwaukee Public Schools for over 30 years and president of the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association. There is one question before you tonight, and that is, will each of you proudly stand with the students of MPS by voting yes to place an operating referendum on the April 2nd ballot? Despite a $7 billion surplus that Director Golka Gandhi mentioned, the state budget failed to provide basic funding for public education, leaving school districts across the state of Wisconsin high and dry, including MPS. These school districts have been given one choice: pass a referendum to guarantee that public school students have the opportunities they deserve, highly qualified certified teachers, art, music, physical education, full-time certified librarians, regular access to a school nurse and support staff in every classroom. The state failed us, but we won't fail us. We won't fail us. In 2020, Milwaukee voters overwhelmingly approved a referendum to provide MPS with the same opportunities as students in wealthier suburban districts. That referendum passed with a landslide vote. That's what we call 78% of Milwaukee voters saying yes, unequivocally, to our students. The proposed referendum would allow MPS to maintain and fully implement a full slate of important offerings like language programs, music and art, physical education and library at every school. In 2020, Milwaukee voters made clear their demand for a robust public education system that sets every child in our charge up for success, regardless of their zip code. I know, I am confident that Milwaukee voters will come together again to support our public school students, and I am asking every board member here tonight to vote yes and join the Milwaukee community in doing what is right for our students. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Elizabeth Kosmak.
Hi, good evening. Elizabeth Kosmak, Kosmach. I am an 11th year special education teacher that accepts all students, even the ones that private schools kick out after they get that 90% money. So, I am here tonight ashamed but not surprised by our Wisconsin legislature, who continuously let down MPS in public education, especially our so-called educational governor Evers. This budget signed in July was another attack on public education. If our elected officials won't put public education or MPS first, I will, and so will everyone else. We will pass this referendum. Also, if Wisconsin legislation and Governor Evers or people who say no to this referendum have problems, we have vacancies, come sub, because we need help. Our students deserve equal playing grounds to have the same opportunities as other districts. I'm a pro canvasser. I've canvassed for many of you up there. I've canvassed for the referendum. I'm ready. I need a canvassing partner. Dr. Posley, let's do it. I'm ready. Are you ready? Please vote yes, because our students deserve it. Thank you.
Tanita Campbell. Is she here? Okay, we'll move to the next person. Quentin Claiborne.
Hey, Quentin Claiborne, Klabon. Hi all, thanks for the presentation today. I want to thank you for apparently adjusting the kind of preliminary one for community input, including mine. And I just want to speak informationally, not for or against. So there are two groups of people who will vote on this referendum. Some care about results. Unfortunately, aspects of Milwaukee's board is less transparent on some aspects than it should be. We have a $138 million in unallocated ESSER $3, about half of the remaining money left in the state. I know that you have budgeted out as a board, and that a majority of it has gone to renovating schools and other facilities, but most other districts have had to pay more toward construction due to inflation and the difficulty of hiring construction staff. Has that gone up, which would take money from operations? We don't know. How are our reading reforms going? The national NAEP test, in which Milwaukee scored last in the nation for black students, worse than Detroit or Baltimore, way worse than Chicago, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Boston, and New York, is this month. Will we still be last? Madison's board has talked about the success of their literacy reforms for hours every other month since summer. I know that you've made a good start. I told you as such in the summer, but there's no reading on the agenda for the meeting right after this, which I hope people stayed for, and there hasn't been one since summer. We don't know if our kids are reading better than they have been. So the other group of voters is families. You know that you're going to have to close and combine a lot of schools in the next few years. It's just true. You're working on a report that will detail current capacity, but my best guess based on the 2018 report is that our schools are only about 73% full, assuming full attendance, which we know we don't have, and that over 40 schools are below 60% capacity. Your average family does not know the shock that's ahead of them. Taxing them more and then closing their schools will infuriate them. Watch the school board meetings in Green Bay, Wausau, Kenosha, and more. The room will be filled every night with enraged parents asking where their money went, even if you can explain it. They sometimes don't understand. While I understand your urgency toward next year's budget, I find it unfortunate that you'll ask for a long-term referendum before we've maximized savings on our school footprint. I realize it's not a cure-all, transportation could get more expensive, but it's absolutely vital to solving our problems. I hope whatever you decide, that you clearly communicate to voters that this additional funds comes with a commitment to results and a commitment to making wiser use of our money. Thanks for listening and good luck with your decision.
The next is Jean Manis or Hannis, I can't tell. What was it?
Jean Yanis.
Thank you.
LLANAS. Good evening, President Herndon, other members of the board. My name is Gene Yanis. I am the construction teacher at North Division High School. I spoke with some of you several weeks ago. I join you tonight to ask you to make a pragmatic and just decision and to vote yes to an operational referendum to give North Division students and all MPS students all the opportunities they deserve. One of the greatest experiences I've had as a teacher is asking my students what they want to do when they graduate. Most of them say, get a job. That's what they said the first week when I asked them. They want to just get a job. When I ask those same students now, a lot of their answers are, I want to go into construction, I want to go into masonry, I want to go into concrete. And this type of enthusiasm is really warming to the heart. It really puts a smile across my face. But more important than that, what it does, it makes me realize that these students want the same thing that all of us want. They just want a chance at a good job. They want a chance at a rewarding life. Teaching construction can be a costly job in terms of supplies, much more than other classes. I do what I can to reuse supplies. I take apart old projects we're doing. I reuse screws. I order less expensive drywall. That being said, my Principal McCord and Vice Principal Bradford have been wonderful. They have never told me no in terms of the supplies that I want to accomplish what I need to get these kids jobs. My students, however, they deserve more and they need more. They need all the school board members to vote yes to support a referendum. This last part, I believe, is the most important. Right now, Wisconsin is at a tipping point in terms of the number of skilled workers we have and the number of skilled workers that we'll need. The Associated Builders and Contractors, the ABC, are predicting Wisconsin needs 546,000 skilled labor jobs. These are good jobs. These are jobs that provide pensions, that can help you get homes. They will help you get everything that a lot of us in this room have. I'm committed to doing my part to help these students, and I would ask that the board do your part and vote yes. Thank you.
Alla Fritz. Okay. The next person is Quentin Sampson Wood.
Quentin Sampson Wood, SAMPSON-WOOD. Good evening, board members, administrators, and valued community members. I stand to you before as the physical education teacher at Our Avenue Community School. I've gained a lot of teaching experience working for Milwaukee Public Schools since August of 2019, and I've held many different roles at Our Avenue School. I've been a special education paraprofessional, I've been a regular education paraprofessional, and now I am a substitute teacher. A main reason I wanted to teach physical education was that I decided that I wanted to promote worthwhile social services through my work ethic and sought to be a community ally and advocate for the school. I believe that working in education has helped me evolve into being a better educator and man, and through this evolution, I've learned to display my greatest strengths and simultaneously recognize and improve my weaknesses. I really enjoy consistently promoting community integration while ensuring safe learning environments for all my students. With this being said, teaching is a journey. Teaching is a journey of discovering what is helpful for students. Students' discoveries in their abilities also become my discoveries, which convinces me that there are no boundaries in teaching. Our students deserve to come back each fall knowing there are no cuts to their schools and classrooms. Our future leaders are to be assisted in understanding how to lead fulfilling and healthier lifestyles where they adhere to their self-discoveries, gain knowledge and skills, and hopefully they pass those on to their community. Our community understands the importance of well-funded public schools as a whole. They have been clear to you and what they want for MPS students, which is the same opportunities provided to those students in suburban communities. We want a district that offers every student regular arts, gym, library, music, and a nurse in every building. With this being said, as a Milwaukee taxpayer and a Milwaukee public educator, I strongly encourage the board to do what's right for our students and place a referendum on the ballot that balances the students' needs with the economic realities facing the citizens of our city. I will vote yes to support a referendum for all MPS students, and I'm asking the school members to do the same. Thank you for your time.
Luz Hernandez.
Luz Hernandez, Hernandez. Good evening, President Herndon, Superintendent Posley, and Board Directors. I am Luz Hernandez, MTA Treasurer. I come to you as an elementary bilingual teacher of 28 years from Milwaukee Public Schools. I have been part of a public school system that offers high-quality bilingual education to students in the city of Milwaukee since the bilingual program's inception in the late 1960s. Back then, MPS's bilingual programs was the envy of cities like New York, Chicago, and LA because it offered and continues to offer not a transitional bilingual program where students were exited out of bilingual education after 2 to 3 years in the program, but rather a developmental maintenance program that values the student's native language while acquiring English and allows them to remain in the bilingual program from kindergarten until graduating from high school. I'm asking all board members, to vote yes to a referendum on the April 2nd ballot to protect quality bilingual education for MPS students. Our students must have adequate funding for teaching materials, staffing of qualified bilingual teachers, educational assistants, and CHAs that speak the language of the approximately 7,000 bilingual students and growing in MPS and their families. Every student in MPS deserves to come back each fall knowing there will be no cuts to their schools and classrooms. Milwaukee residents understand the importance of well-funded public schools and the impact they have on the quality of life in the city of Milwaukee. I know this because 4 years ago, I canvassed for the referendum. I spoke to city residents on the near south side, north side, and Bayview, and heard firsthand their strong support for students and our public schools. The voting results mirrored my canvassing experience, where 78% of Milwaukee residents voted yes for the referendum. I am a resident of the city of Milwaukee, and I fully support and will vote yes to an operating referendum. I implore the board to do the same. Thank you.
Catherine Loss.
Catherine Loss, Loss. President Hernandez and Dr. Posley and school board directors. As a Milwaukee resident, I'm here to speak in favor of the new referendum. As a city of, I believe that the schools of MPS need to be fairly funded. And especially after seeing the board presentation about how funding has not increased from the state, it's been drilled into me. I'm a proud principal of Lloyd Barbie Montessori School, and I believe that this referendum will support the students in my school. My own children, who are in their 30s, attended MPS. They attended Elm, Roosevelt, Morse, and King. They had so many opportunities and great experiences when they attended these schools, and I want to be able to offer all of those same experiences to my students currently. The Montessori teachers and paraprofessionals and support staff that work at my school work really hard daily, creating a safe, enriched educational environment for the children who attend Barbie. The fair funding this referendum will allow us will be able to continue to offer authentic Montessori education at our school that my students deserve. And I'm going to, of course, vote yes, and I will canvass with people who want to canvass. So please pass this. Thank you.
Adrian Hicks. Go ahead, please.
Adrienne Hicks, Hicks.
President Herendon, and Superintendent Keith Posley, and the rest of the board. I am the president of the I am the president of the Milwaukee Educational Assistant Association, the educational assistant unit of the MTEA. MPS educational assistants are crucial to the daily operation of MPS classrooms. In the recent years, MPS has made significant strides in increasing the amount of EAs in our buildings. We have also been able to increase hours for EAs, providing students and teachers with the support they need and deserve. EAs also regularly fill in because of the shortage of substitutes we have been seeing in the recent years. The gains that we have made for our students in the way of educational support in their classrooms are under threat if we do not pass this referendum. Our students deserve to come back each fall knowing there will be no cuts to their school and their classrooms. Milwaukee residents understand the importance of well-funded public schools in our community as a whole. They have been clear. They want MPS students to have the same opportunities that are offered to kids in the suburban communities. They want a district that offers every student regular art, gym, library, music, programming, and school nurses in every building. I encourage the board to do what is right for our students and place a referendum on the ballot that balances our students' needs with the economic reality facing the people of our city. Thank you.
Nick Honorato.
Good afternoon, good evening. Nick Honorato, O-N-O-R-A-T-O. President Herndon, members of the board, Superintendent Posley, I'm a special education teacher. I am a homeowner in Milwaukee. I am a product of MPS and the father of 3 outstanding MPS students. I come to you to support the administration's plan to address the current projected budget shortfall through referendum. I understand that we will be asking the citizens of this city to come to the rescue of our schools. And much like our previous effort in 2020, I am confident that the city of Milwaukee will show up. They'll show up because our students, my students, our kids deserve to have schools that provide learning opportunities from pre-K and Head Start until they cross the graduation stage. They deserve a district that provides art and music and gym and opportunities to expand their horizons beyond the walls of our 100-year-old buildings. Our cities show up for our kids. We will have 82 days to knock doors, to call, text friends, post TikTok dances, and spread our message to our neighbors. State funding hasn't kept up with inflation for almost 20 years, and this current state budget fails to adequately fund our public schools. The budget is failing students across the state, forcing other urban, rural, suburban districts to also have to go to referendum just to keep the lights on for next year. Our kids deserve better. I support this referendum because it is a tool that we have right now. It will require hard work and organization and an organized effort across the city to educate our citizens about the opportunities our students deserve and how a referendum will deliver those opportunities. We have 82 days. 82 days to rally the cities for our kids. 82 days to organize our families and our friends. 82 days to save our public schools. 82 days until this city once again votes yes for our MPS students. Thank you.
Clarence Nicholas. Ingrid Walker Henry.
My name is Ingrid Walker Henry, WALKER-HENRY. Good evening, Board and Administration. I am the Vice President of the MTEA. I'm a 23-year teacher in MPS. I'm a proud MPS parent and auntie. 4 years ago, the Milwaukee Public School Board saw the need to provide the students with more opportunities, and they moved forward with the referendum that would provide MPS students with opportunities and experiences that would make up a well-rounded education. 4 years ago, the people of Milwaukee overwhelmingly supported the children and workers of Milwaukee Public Schools by showing that they valued public education and the expansion of arts and other opportunities with a 78% vote. I am a proud product of MPS as well. I know the academic and enrichment opportunities that were available to me at Townsend, Morris, and Riverside. As a parent, I want those experiences for my child. I know every parent in Milwaukee wants the same. As a teacher, I wanted the best of everything for my students. For myself and other teachers, that included things like collaborating with the art, the music, the Phi-Ed teachers. And we did that collaboration to expand student learning beyond what you find in a book or the four walls of a classroom. These experiences happen when our public schools are well-funded. Voting yes for this referendum is what is needed to ensure that MPS continues to maintain and grow its certified teacher pool, maintain and grow art and music offerings, and ensure that schools have the staff needed to provide the essential services that students and families depend on. I urge this board to vote yes for MPS because our children deserve it and everything else in the world.
William Pickard.
Hello, I'm William Pickard, P-I-C-K-A-R-D. To start, Youth Empowered in the Struggle and Voces de la Frontera have deep roots in the fight for public education and fully support putting this referendum on the ballot and allowing for the people to decide. But even beyond that, as a student, this terrifies me. Budget cuts all around, knowing that already my classrooms are limited in size and limited in the amount of teachers we have. It's terrifying. I see it and I know that teachers are leaving left and right. I know that teachers don't want jobs that aren't going to pay for them to live. I know teachers of mine have 2 jobs. It's depressing to know that beyond being at school, grading my homework, they have to work another job. So hearing that they're going to, their salary is going to be frozen. They're going to be sitting at the same level for like a little bit. It's not the most exciting. And I don't want to be stuffed in a classroom with an overworked teacher, too many students. It's not something I want to do. And I'm sure the members of the board could agree. Another part of it is community in schools. It's something I don't hear brought up enough when we talk about school budgets or schools in general. School community is very important for child development. Having a place to go where you have peers just like you is something that's important for developing. I mean, we have art classes, music classes, extracurriculars, even extra classes like psychology, stuff that can like enhance interests. I don't want to see those cut. The community I have at my school, the community I have with my classmates, and the community that's formed there, seeing that possibly wiped away because we don't have the money for it is really depressing. Thank you for your time.
Sierra Brown.
Hello, President Herndon, members of the board. My name is Sierra Brown, B-R-O-W-N. I support student success. I absolutely support our teachers and their efforts to facilitate our student success. The board needs to demonstrate their willingness to hold the administration accountable for past and present budget issues. They need to demonstrate to the public that they are doing their due diligence and operating in good faith. As a taxpayer, I have not seen this. What I'm hearing in the ask for more funding is all of the ways the state is shortchanging our students. The board and administration has agency in this matter. Our lobbyist has fallen short. As some elected officials say, our current lobbyist is a joke. The current budget allocates funding for lobbying at the state level. I refuse to accept excuses about the state withholding funds from our district when no good faith or meaningful effort has been made to lobby and advocate for our district at the state level. It is not the state's fault that the district hid $35 million in fund downs. When the board found out that they needed to add $35 million to the burden on taxpayers 4 years ago, did they announce it or take accountability for the decision? Did they alter policy so the admin could not repeat this gross misallocation of funds? The public needs to know exactly where MPS cut corners. How can the current MPS administration be trusted with an additional $200 million when they have made so many costly mistakes and have so many mistakes so far? Students and parents continue to unenroll. From today until April, how will the board demonstrate their due diligence to prevent budget mismanagement and address the ongoing absence of administrative accountability? I know people with dissenting opinions are fighting to put students first. The question is, does the administration put students first in their actions prior to this referendum? Thank you.
Jesse Bowling or Belling?
That's the next thing.
Andrea Corona?
Andrea Corona, C-O-R-O-N-A. President Herndon, members of the board. In my role as principal in Milwaukee Public Schools, I believe that my greatest responsibility is to advocate for opportunities for children. So I believe strongly that my students deserve the opportunity to experience vibrant arts programming and a robust, text-rich library environment. During the first 10 years of my career as principal, the school funding formula was not able to provide our school with adequate allocations for music and library. As a school leader, I struggled to ensure that my students had exposure to the arts and worked with my community to bring in volunteers to help staff our library just for circulation. In 2020, after receiving support from our community with a referendum, our school was allocated a full-time librarian and a full-time high school music teacher. In these 3 short years, our students have thrived with access to programming and instruction that has transformed their school experience. After hiring our music teacher only 3 short years ago, we have grown our middle and high school music program from practically nothing to a school with a vocal program, 3 orchestras, 4 modern band sections, and most recently, a drum line. In December, our students performed their winter concerts, and 400 students got up on that stage to showcase their talents. That is 400 students that previously had no opportunity for that kind of instruction or experience. Those students' lives have been positively impacted in immeasurable ways. In addition to providing the instructors, the referendum dollars provided the musical instruments and equipment. All of this would have been impossible for the school funding to provide. Our school library program has engaged students in reading in countless ways. Students can examine culturally relevant text sets, learn about new genres of literature, and learn valuable academic research skills, now with the support of a highly trained professional librarian. She has formed book clubs, manga clubs, a mobile library program, and trained an army of high school library assistants. This text-rich environment is so important not only for our students' academic future, but also helps them develop a love of reading and learning that will last a lifetime. The 2020 referendum has given our students in Milwaukee Public Schools what they deserve to have: a vibrant arts program and a robust, text-rich library environment. The last time we asked for help, the voters of Milwaukee did what the state budget would not: make it right for our kids. I strongly support the board's resolution to seek support from our community with another referendum in 2024. Thank you.
Eric Falk. Belinda Freeman. No. Joe DiCarlo.
Joe DiCarlo, D-I, capital C-A-R-L-O. President Herndon, Board Directors, Dr. Posley, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I am the principal of Maryland Avenue Montessori School, parent of former MPS students, and a Milwaukee homeowner and taxpayer. And I support the board approval for a referendum to provide appropriate funding for all MPS schools and students. I've been an administrator for 16 years at Maryland Montessori, and I've implemented a lot of budgets. Over the years, that's changed, but there's always been challenges. Years ago, some of the decisions became, when you look at the numbers, do I cut a teacher? Do I cut a music teacher? Do I cut an art teacher? Do I cut a phy ed teacher? We all know where that ended up. As Ms. Corona stated, the 2020 referendum allowed us to have now full-time art, music, and phy ed, which has allowed our programs to thrive. It has increased things for students that they would never experience before. A lot of people see that as extra. I see that as necessary in education. Recently, budgets have changed. And a lot of the decisions now, as Director Leonard mentioned, become, do we increase class sizes to keep our teachers? Which in effect, a lot of times makes it more difficult for teachers to not only address the academic, but the social emotional needs of the students, and ultimately makes it more difficult for the students to succeed. I see the referendum as not extra funding, but increasing the funding back to appropriate levels to support our students and our schools. My job as a principal through implementing a budget is to support students' overall learning and growth. It's first done by staffing. We need to have staff in front of the students. After that, we look at the resources for the students and staff. Without appropriate funding, I'm not able to put staff in front of the students to allow that to happen, allow the success of the students. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Maryland Avenue Montessori School staff and community. They are fantastic. Our teachers are rocks. They work all the time. They're rock stars. They work together. They work with students. They work with each other. They work with family. They work with the community. Even so, it's challenging. You have increased class sizes. You have more to do with less. The paraprofessionals, I can't forget, they're the glue that hold the school together. They do everything that's necessary. Without funding, not just for teachers, but for the support staff that's necessary, our students are not getting what they need and what they deserve. It's essential for us to have enough funding necessary through this referendum to support appropriately our school community at Maryland Montessori and every school community across MPS, because all the students of Milwaukee and all the whole Milwaukee community depends on it. Thank you.
Andrew Reiser.
Good evening, Andrew Reiser, R-E-I-S-E-R. President Herndon, members of the board, Dr. Posley, thank you for allowing me to speak. It will be hard for me to follow up to what my last two colleagues just said. Andrew Reiser, principal at Trowbridge School of Great Lakes Studies. I can speak to you briefly about what the referendum that passed in 2020 has meant for the students at Trowbridge. It has meant full-time art, music, and Phi-Ed for our students. That may seem like extra, but the test scores would indicate otherwise. I'm proud to say that Trowbridge, since bringing those things on board, has moved to exceed expectations on the state report card. Not only that, but we have families coming back to us, and we are now a growing, thriving community. That is in large part because when families come to tour, they want to know that we have things to offer their children, such as library, music, visual arts, physical education, in conjunction with some of the other things that we do with the science, and integrating that across the content has allowed us to grow and thrive and truly service the children of Milwaukee Public Schools the way that they deserve to be serviced. Thank you for your time.
Ben Zaber. Okay, he's seemed like he isn't here. Gina Stezlala.
Good evening, my name is Jenna Stezala, S-T-E-Z-A-L-A. I am a proud 30-year veteran educator in MPS and am currently serving as the proud assistant principal at OW Holmes Community School. This referendum will continue to provide our deserving students enrichment through library media, art, music, and physical education. It has enhanced our students' educational experience as we purposely support the whole child from K-3, Head Start through 8th grade. Through the exposure to different types of music, knowledge of healthy choices, and the importance of physical activity, opportunities to learn about oneself through the expression of art, and the development of their love of reading beyond the community they live in, as we've seen a steady increase in the number of books checked out by our students. By supporting the whole child with library media, art, music, and physical education, we have seen an increase in student enrollment, improved attendance, and parent involvement. Our students look forward to attending those classes. As an educator determined to provide our students with a quality education, I support the proposed referendum and ask that the board do the same. Supporting this fair funding referendum will help our students, staff, and parents continue to proudly say, "There's no place like Holmes." Thank you.
Mark Kubiak. It's not a Z.
Good evening, President Herndon, members of the board, and Superintendent Posley. Mark Kubicek, K-U-B-I-C-E-K. I come to you not only as a MPS principal at Burdick Elementary, but also a Milwaukee homeowner. I am here tonight to support the referendum. As mentioned by our previous principals, the previous referendum has changed the lives of our students significantly. I look primarily at our specials that we provide our students, our art, our Phi-Ed, and our music. I look at our music program and how much it has grown in the last 2 years. We were able to hire a full-time music teacher. She single-handedly has brought music back to Burdick. Not only has she put in countless hours to make sure that we are having concerts with students, She has also brought back band to our middle school. Students have instruments that they've never had before, brand new instruments. In addition, traveling music. We have had the opportunity to have a drum line. We have had the opportunity to have a brass band. If we did not have the previous referendum, we would not have this opportunity. Also, our music teacher has brought instruments to all of our students, not only our middle school students. If you were able to see our previous concert in December, our 5-year-olds were playing instruments. Our first graders were playing instruments. And the smiles on their faces, the warmth in their hearts, the looks on our parents' faces. So that is what our students need in this district. Our art teacher is amazing. Our Phi-Ed teacher is amazing. In addition, we are looking at funds that are provided from Referendum. We're looking at our support staff, our counselors, our psychologists, our social workers, our paraprofessionals, our CHAs, who are relying on extra hours to provide support, love, and care for our students every single day. Without that, we're going to struggle. There's no lie about it. Thank you for your time, and I hope we vote yes for this referendum.
Stephen Lubar.
Good evening. Thank you, President Herndon, members of the board, Dr. Posley. My name is Stephen Lubar, L-U-B-A-R, and I have the honor to be the Executive Director of the Administrator and Supervisors Council, the ASC. The ASC represents the principals, vice principals, and administrators at MPS. I'll be brief, but as we all know, MPS must have the resources in place to support its students, its programs, and its staff. A referendum is necessary and will support programs including, but not limited, as you've heard, to art programs, gym programs, vibrant libraries, music programs, language programs, and special education programs, to name a few. Properly funded public schools are vital to our students' success and the success of the city of Milwaukee. The ASC encourages the board to do what's necessary and just for our students and vote yes to place a referendum on the ballot. Thank you.
Claudia Heller.
Claudia Heller, H-E-L-L-E-R. Good evening. I come to you today to encourage you to vote yes to placing a referendum on the ballot for the City of Milwaukee residents. The residents to be the deciders on how we are going to address this budget shortfall. I will vote yes on the referendum to support our district, its students, and our city. My children are grown, graduates from Milwaukee Public Schools, and I believe all children deserve the education that they receive through MPS. My community deserves to have a voice on how we are going to address the budgetary shortfalls from the state. Today, I remind you that our City of Milwaukee children deserve to have their community stand up for them loudly and clearly. As a teacher of multilingual learners at Milwaukee Parkside School of the Arts, I see firsthand how students and teachers respond to a school with full-time specialists. Students at our school, which serve children from 10 zip codes and serve 21 languages, are able to consistently grow in their communication and problem-solving skills, partially because the whole child is addressed on a daily basis. My students, who are learning English as a second, a third, sometimes a fourth language, are given the opportunity to practice English both academically and socially in these critical, low-risk settings. They grow, they thrive, they succeed. In addition to offering our students these opportunities as their counterparts in other districts that other districts receive, I'm amazed on a daily basis how our classroom teachers and support staff guide our students as they work through trauma. This is possible because we have consistent staff who know our students personally. Our students need and deserve this connection. Our students deserve to know that each year they will have the same opportunities to grow and learn with the same resources from the previous years. They deserve that commitment and love from us, their staunch supporters.
Madam Secretary, that is the last person that I have the application or speaker slip for. So with that, is there any further discussion along this line? Director Carr.
Thank you, President Herndon. I first want to say thank you to everyone that is here this evening, either tuning in virtually or in person. I also want to say that I am totally in support of funding our children in the district. And I always have been, always will be, and it is my belief that if the district were adequately funded at the state level, this referendum would not be needed. And so I think this is one thing I'll say. This is an opportunity for us as stakeholders, parents, educators, elected leaders, taxpayers, to really increase accountability and fix the funding flaw at the state level and not on the backs of our local taxpayers who are still in search of a return on their previous investments. The other thing I will say is I've had the opportunity to speak with constituents in District 4, and it's really unfortunate, and I'm just going to speak openly, honestly tonight, not operating as any politician or anything like that. Every time I look in the audience and I hear the testimonies, and even as I reflect on my experience on the board, the missing piece is always the families who are so deeply invested in our district, but also facing the majority, if not most of the disparities, the unfortunate realities. When I look in the audience, I see individuals who are employed by our district. I see individuals who do have special interests. I see individuals who do love our children and love our city, love the communities, because that's the other thing. It's not just one community, it's a plethora of communities. When I look in the audience, I see that. But what, again, I don't see are those that are significantly operating at a disadvantage. Tonight, what I've observed is that we are focusing on the burden or the lack thereof of local taxpayers. At no point are we asking those difficult questions that so many that work within the district are shunned for or retaliated against because they pose those difficult questions. Where are the dollars going? How does it align with the needs of our children, our families? How am I getting a return on my investment so that there's a reduction in crime, so that our children are eating food that is nourishing for their bodies? I remember sitting in the audience in 2019, even 2020, and I joined you all in my own way fighting for a referendum because I know the needs, I understand the needs of our children. That was 4 years ago. We're here today, again. We know what we're dealing with on a state level. We sit on this platform and we point the finger at state legislators, rightfully so, but I have yet to be invited to join the collective and march to the state and demand, if we gotta do sleep-ins or whatever, demand that we get what we need in order to do better by our children. We talk about the problems, and I struggle with experiencing solutions. And it's unfortunate because, again, we talk about the burden on taxpayers, but we fail to acknowledge the other burdens that are a result of the failures of our district, the failures of our state legislation. I don't want to sit here and falsify or fabricate anything, and I understand that my way of educating my constituents and my people, those that look like me, may not always be the right way. But I'll be damned if I sit on this board and continue to allow us to point the fingers at everyone else instead of taking ownership for the things that we have or have not done. It is unfortunate that we are asking taxpayers to consistently bear the burden of totally funding our schools and not putting in the work, not practicing those theories, but more so continuing to theorize these practices. It's not getting us anywhere. Someone asked me, where do you see MPS in the next 5 to 7 years? And if I'm being honest, I don't know. I don't know, because if I'm going according to the historical trend right now, we're going to be back here in 4 to 5 years. What is the plan to address the systemic aspect of the disparities, the inequities? I don't see that. The other thing I will say, too, is the presentation that the audience, that the public sees, we see that. We're given limited time to process this, to research this. And it's unfortunate that individuals that are in the positions are punished for speaking the truth and holding our district accountable and leading with advocacy or holding us to that. We have to do more besides sitting in this auditorium, pointing the finger at everybody who's been to blame, and instead marching to the state capitol and doing what's necessary for our children. And it is very unfortunate that the kids who look like me suffer the most. You all are here represent your students. Where are the representation from the schools in District 4, the most impoverished district? Where are they? Who's showing up for my kids? And not just the child that I birthed, but every freaking body else. It's not enough to talk anti-racism. It's not enough to talk inequities. It's not enough to be catty on this platform and refuse to work together because we don't like each other. We have to put in the legwork. And until we do that, we're going to be here having the same discussion with the same fear-mongering, asking for the same things with limited to no results. And who suffers? Our children and our educators. So I need you all to be a little bit more transparent and honest about where we are and what needs to occur. Because we can ask them for this amount, but what's the long-term plan? What is the sustainability plan? And I don't think we're engaging in enough of those conversations. And that's what needs to happen. And so I can't say no, because I definitely love and support children, but I can't say yes. So I will be an abstain. And that's my remarks for tonight.
Anyone else? Any over here? Okay. Director O'Halloran.
Thank you, President Herndon. So as some of the speakers came up, I was reminded of the specialties. We had one person ask, what will be cut? What are the risks if this doesn't pass? Can you bring greater clarity? Because we spend roughly, let's say, okay, we have to balance it through transportation. That would be, maybe we could cut every discretionary bus route. That would be 30 million. What else needs to be cut, right? So I think it would be wise moving forward if we can have, just a one pager that shows these are the things, these are what they cost that are under consideration. Because within my district, we have several Montessori schools. We have from Parkside, we had a Teacher of the Year, Wisconsin Teacher of the Year. So they have the specialty with art. We have the Milwaukee Community Schools Partnership. We have an Italian immersion program. We have International Baccalaureate. We have the School of Freshwater Sciences. Each school community is unique, but unfortunately, my concern is if this does not pass, what are the conversations that we're going to have? What will have to be pulled back? Later on, we're going to hear about the Montessori strategic plan. That costs money. In November, we talked about increasing music for K-8 schools at the middle level. That's like $2.4 million. You know, and these are things, to be clear, that's not like us as a board just coming up with an idea and saying, like, throwing it at the wall to see if it sticks. We're responding to what our constituents and what our parents are asking us to do. And so I think it's really important that we're clear, if this doesn't pass, you know, what is at risk. I do think it would also be wise to produce, here is what the prior referendum, what we did with the money, if there are vacancies that weren't able to be filled, if we can just talk about that, because at the anecdotal level, yes, that's the first time my kids had full-time music. For their first time. My kid is in 9th grade now. After the referendum, that was the first time they had music. Like, that's something that I think is, I don't want to get lost. I think that it's really important to say, thank you for your investment. Thank you for your commitment to our children. Here is what you helped us achieve. And here is what we're asking you to help us sustain. And if it sounds like I'm like really personal about this, it's because I'm not, you know, asking you for some abstract children. I'm asking you specifically to invest in my children. You know, we had a speaker here tonight say he has 3 outstanding children. I think all of our children are outstanding and worthy of investment. And I mean, I am also a homeowner, so I am asking myself, you know, this question. So it's not like I'm asking someone else to fund it. And to be clear, I already marched to Madison. I walked 60 miles. And I was met with silence. And so I feel, if it feels like I haven't exhausted all of my options, I am not sure what other options I can consider. I am going to put my steps in doing canvassing, but if anybody is interested in marching to Madison again, I will start from central office this time. Last time we started in Palmyra Eagle, I think one of the outcomes was that we potentially helped save their district. But, you know, I think we have done the advocacy. We have been met frequently with nothing, and that's not us. That's not MPS being met with nothing. That's everyone. All public education advocates in this state have been rallying around these issues, around special education. We've had this discussion since 2017. You know, this isn't new. This isn't like something that we haven't talked about, that we haven't tried before. So going forward, I absolutely will be voting yes tonight. You know, vote public. I was yes for MPS last time. I will be yes for MPS this time. My 2 requests then are, can you bring greater clarity to what is at risk? And I would ask that you just, I know we have the referendum supplements that you put in the budgets. People may not avail themselves of those 20-page documents, but if you could just do like a kind of highlight of, thank you for your investment last time. This is what we were able to achieve, and this is what we don't want to see fall by the wayside. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Director Simpson.
Thank you, President Herndon. Yeah, I was just wondering, you know, as families are, and all taxpayers are considering the referendum, where would you suggest they go to get information on what we're asking, you know, what that money will be used for? What are some resources that the average person can access, and where would they find them?
Administration.
President Herndon, members of the board, one of the things, if the board votes to approve this item tonight, we will have a website up first thing tomorrow morning that will do questions and answers, and will answer all of those questions, and also will provide email as well as a phone number with any other information that you would need answers to. We would be more than happy to have that provided. And yes, we will be able to provide a detailed plan of what will be cut We have started this in this presentation. We will zero in on those dollar amounts and put that out there, as well as what we have done with the previous referendum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chasen.
Thank you, Chair Herndon. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. There were some comments made by speakers that I think speak to some misinformation that is likely rooted in an audio recording, a discussion of which is probably better served at another time. But I did want to make sure that I offered some clarity around those points. Firstly, this office has no evidence of hidden or missing or misallocated funds at the end of any fiscal year. It has no evidence of illegality or impropriety related to unspent dollars at the end of any fiscal year. What this office does have is a strongly held opinion that there are legitimate policy questions surrounding how to increase the transparency of such year-end activities. I believe that's an opinion consistent with the charge of the office, which is to increase public transparency. Secondly, this office does recognize affirmatively that the current finding by our external auditors of a material weakness surrounding the preparation of the district's financial statements, and it shares with this board the expectation that that be promptly corrected. It is oftentimes difficult to offer information in furtherance of public transparency without it being received or perceived as casting aspersions on a referendum that would offset an otherwise unsustainable funding model. And I appreciate the board allowing me the space to try to navigate that successfully. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more remarks? With that, I'd just like to say that for many of us, we have fought the state for far too many years. I, for one, should never have spent the last probably 10 or 15 years fighting the state for the exact thing we're here tonight for. That is absolutely ridiculous. At my own expense, I drove to and from hearings in Madison and sat there all day because I wasn't a big shot. And therefore, I had to sit there until everybody that were members of the Blue Ribbon Committee or whatever, the Senate or the Assembly, and wait until they left, and then I was allowed to speak. How much of that type of treatment are we to endure? I do agree with Director Carr that our voices should be louder. Far too many times I was the only one from Milwaukee, but I didn't let that stop me. I kept going anyways, and I still haven't stopped. And I probably never will until I take my last breath, because I know this. All of those years that I spent running back and forth to Madison, I know this. I know that this was purposeful. It has been purposeful. For over 20-some years, 27 years, this district has been defunded. I have read too many policies put forth by many of the same people in our state legislature that were there 10, 15 years ago. And every policy that they put forth, far too many times, it specifically identified MPS. How many years are we supposed to keep getting kicked in the face and kicked in the face? And they can't, and now, you know, the referendums we didn't reach for. 2019 was the first time in 20-some years that a referendum had been put forth by Milwaukee Public Schools. As I sat in the audience right back there for far too many years, our board directors would say things like, well, we can't complain to Madison because if we claim too loud or complain too loud, they will do things that are much worse than what they're doing to us today. And what I'm saying is, how could it get worse? Our kids got kicked in the teeth. They lost staff. They lost programming. They lost curriculum. They lost the things that drive students to go to school in the first place. their arts, their FIAD, their programming, librarians. Can you imagine? So yes, I'm a big sponsor of that referendum, and I was the sponsor of getting those things back into our schools. But I'll never stop fighting Madison. I never will until they do what's right by our children. And with that, I'll stop preaching. And if there's no further discussion, will the secretary please call the roll?
Madam Chair, we don't have a motion yet, but before you call for a motion, I do want to mention that we had 39 individuals who filled out speaker slips who did not want to speak, but who support the item, and their information will be made part of the record.
Thank you. With that, could I have a motion? Director Zumber.
Thank you, Chair Herndon. I move that we approve the administration's recommendation to authorize the school district budget to exceed revenue limit for recurring purposes as outlined in option 3 in the attachment.
Thank you. Could I have a second, please? Okay, Director Leonard.
I second that.
Okay, Madam Secretary? Yes.
I would like to make a substitute motion.
Okay.
Can I do that while there's a motion on the floor? Okay. I move that we adopt the referendum, but we adopt option 2.
Madam Secretary?
I have the motion. It requires a second for discussion.
Second
I'll second that.
by Director O'Halloran. Okay. With that, we need to vote again.
No, we're discussing my motion, my substitute motion.
You have a motion and a substitute motion on the floor, so you could either call for the roll or allow discussion on the motion.
Okay. Discussion on the motion. Director Zumber.
Thank you, Chair Herndon. I just wanted, the main reason why I was supporting option 3 is because I do think it's important to be mindful that, we have a lot of working families in this city who are being asked to pay a lot in taxes right now, and I appreciate the administration bringing forward a conservative recommendation that doesn't go over that $200 per $100,000 home. I'm remembering some conversations I had during the last referendum with people who, it was a really big lift, and I think it's going to be an even bigger lift right now, and I want to make sure that we can get the support needed, but also recognize that, our community is being asked to do a lot, and so it just comes out of a respect for that. And then also, I am committed to doing what it takes to attending these meetings, reading contracts, and cutting where we can cut. And that takes us to all attend the meetings, if we're going to, talk about that. And I'm willing to do that work and work with all of you to try to find ways to make this work with option 3. But I'm open, to other considerations.
Director Gokul-Gandhi.
The only reason I put forth option 2, and I so appreciate the care and consideration for the taxpayers, and I agree with you between the sales tax and now this, it's just that looking at the projections that you have into 28, 29, to put us in a position where we're not coming back with urgency to find a solution and really giving us a whole life cycle of time to allocate the appropriate money. And if you look at the difference, I'm not saying that the impact isn't going to be big, but it's about $20 between the first and the second one. And so I think for the peace of mind that we would have for that projection out until 28, 29 to not come back in the red for that $20 difference is, as a homeowner in the city of Milwaukee who receives a tax bill and cries every time I see it, I would be okay knowing that our kids are going to be safe for the next 5 years. And I'm not saying that we're not going to have a discussion after that, but I just feel like if we're going to do this, let's do it with fidelity and let's go the middle road that affords us the optionality to really think about in the next 5 years, how are we going to implement our budgets and our contracts with fidelity so that we can look for places to make that savings in year 6.
Okay,
Would you like me to call the roll?
yes.
Okay. On Director Gokul Gandhi's motion to approve adoption of Resolution Option 2, which reads, "Be it resolved by the Milwaukee Board of School Directors of the Milwaukee Public Schools, Milwaukee and Washington Counties, Wisconsin, that the revenues included in the school district budget be authorized to exceed the revenue limit specified in Section 121.91 Wisconsin statutes by $140 million for the 2024-2025 school year, by an additional $51 million for the 2025-26 school year, by an additional $47 million for the 2026-27 school year, and by an additional $14 million for a total of $252 million for the 2027-2028 school year and thereafter for the recurring purposes of sustaining educational programming, including offering career and technical education programs, attracting and retaining certified educators, and further improving art, music, physical education, and language programs." Director Carr.
Abstain.
Point of information. Point of information. Director Carr, are you abstaining because you have a conflict of interest, or are you abstaining because you don't want to make your opinion public?
I'm abstaining because I'm abstaining for all the reasons I mentioned earlier.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Jackson.
No.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Seamson.
Aye.
Director Zombor.
Aye.
And President Herndon.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 1 no, 1 abstention. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item 2, action on a request to approve a resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of approval of a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit for recurring purposes. The administration recommends that the board approve a resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed the revenue limit for recurring purposes that corresponds to the option previously determined in item 1.
Would the administration please present this item?
Good evening, President Herndon, members of the board. The administration is recommending the board approve the recommendation, the referendum question correspondence to the previous meeting, the previous item that was before us. We have Ms. Buchanan from Quarles and Brady who will walk us through this modeling, please.
Thank you, Dr. Posley. President Herndon and members of the board, Allison Buchanan with Quarles and Brady. This second item on the agenda corresponds to the motion that was just made and just approved. It sets forth the procedural requirements to put the ballot question on the April election, sets forth the form of the ballot as an exhibit, other notices that get published leading up to the direction, and basically directs that the ballot be filed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Madam Secretary, are there any members of the public to wish to make comments or ask questions?
We do have one individual, Rick I'm sorry, I can't read your, Steem something? If you could please spell your last name and then give your comment.
I'll add it. Hi, Rich Steenwick, Steenwyk. Apologize for the hasty and poor handwriting as I tried to get a comment in. I realize we're past the vote of actually doing the referendum, which is great. Glad we got that far. So this is a rather maybe very technical question. I noticed that the ballot wording includes Washington County. I don't know if I understand why, so maybe just a quick explanation of that and whether that affects who votes on it. So I'll just leave it at that and yield the rest of my time. Thanks.
Okay, there's no more. Somebody raising their hand over here? Okay,
Yes,
go ahead.
Sure. President Herndon and members of the board, Allison Buchanan with Quarles and Brady. There is a parcel within Washington County. I believe it's a commercial property where there is not technically a voter or voters, but part of the district does technically lie within Washington County, thus to account for all of the district, that is why it's listed in the resolution and the ballot.
That's right. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Are there board members that have questions or comments? There doesn't appear to be. If there's, Director Leonard.
Just to make sure we understand, the next move, of course, requires us to get ready to go to work to make this happen. So everything is mobilization. People that say, oh, this group is not going to like it and this and that, that's all well and good. I've been doing real politics for well over 30 years, door to door, make sure we have our stuff together, and I'm inviting anyone that really wants to put skin in the game, prepare yourself to do that. 82 days, as was mentioned, thank you very much. That's right, 82 days. I'm just giving you a quick primer on this, on how it works. I mean, we had, for the last referendum, we initially started without COVID, without being shut down, so we were able to go door to door in the snow. And it really had a very positive effect. A lot of people actually responded to the low cost of what this referendum was asking from them as taxpayers, and they understood what it meant to their children and the community, even if they didn't have children in the community. So actually, we're lowballing a lot of things that we do, which makes this possible. Then we had to go to COVID, and we had to do it by phone, and that was at least 1,000 phone calls. And I would have to say, we probably had about 100 people doing that 5 to 6 days a week minimum. So it takes a lot of work, and I'm just really, I can't help that we have to stress this, but we really need as many people as possible to cover the houses, cover your neighborhoods, and make sure that we get that message out that if this doesn't happen, I don't think there's a question of what's going to happen to MPS. I disagree with that. I think that it's going to be a disaster for our district down the road. So I think this is an all hands on deck kind of situation that must happen. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's not further discussion, could I have a motion, please? Director Gokul Gandhi.
I move that we approve the action on a request to provide for a referendum election on the question of the approval of a, I move that we have this question appear on a ballot measure. Is that correct?
May I clarify?
Yes, you
that
can.
the intent of the motion is to adopt the resolution as described in the attachment labeled option 2, which would
Oh.
correspond to your previous action.
Yes, Jill, that's what I said, right? Yes.
I have the motion. It requires a second for discussion.
Second.
Director Garcia.
I move we call the roll.
Could you call the roll?
On Director Gokul Gandhi's motion to approve a resolution providing for referendum election on the question of the approval of a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit for recurring purposes as outlined in the attachment labeled option 2. Director Carr.
Abstain.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul-Gandhi,
Aye.
Director Jackson,
No.
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director O'Halloran,
Aye.
Director Seamson,
Aye.
Director Zombor,
Aye.
and President Herndon.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 1 no, 1 abstention. The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Next item, please.
Madam Chair, that was the last item on this meeting's agenda.
Okay, as a reminder, the meeting of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation will begin shortly after this meeting adjourns. There will be no further business before the board